Hi, I'm Heather, and I wanted to come on here today to talk about one of my favorite books, so I'm a little biased. And I also wanted to talk about this article that I came across that critiques both the author and the book specifically. So we'll talk about everyone's favorite, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Obviously, it's an older book. I think that came out in 2015. But, with the world of TikTok and Instagram and all that sort of thing, I feel like it's gotten big and continues to be big, especially as she continues writing, which is really cool. So I'll link the article below in the comments, but you can find it on calvinchimes.org. The article is called Sarah J. Maas's Success Comes at the Expense of Young Readers. And it is by Maya Overman. I hope I'm saying that correctly. She's a general assignment editor. And like I said, she published this on January 29th, 2024. So you can go and read the article. It's not very long. There's a good amount of comments, and I just kind of came across it randomly. I wasn't particularly looking for a critique or anything like that, but it kind of hit some interesting points that I just wanted to kind of dive into. I just realized my ring is fitting for this. I just got it at a thrift store. So it seems like Maya's biggest issue with the book is that it has sex scenes and is marketed as, for children, is kind of what she's saying. She's talking about young adult, and quote unquote, in the book publishing world, young adult usually refers to readers 12 to 18 and are often marketed towards middle or high school readers. Which absolutely, I agree with that assessment of, what YA is. YA tends to not have as mature themes or scenes as A Court of Thorns and Roses. I think, one YA series that, kind of breaks some of the rules, I would consider The Hunger Games. It's more graphic. There is definitely heavier themes, especially, slavery, war, killing children, psychological warfare, especially towards the end. So it's not that I think YA can't be marketed successfully with mature audiences, but I think that it sounds like, Maya's biggest issue is that there's sex scenes and it's being marketed to young adults, or it was being marketed, I should say. And honestly, I think that's valid. But I don't think that that's a Sarah J. Maas mistake. Sarah J. Maas, the book was originally published by Bloomsbury, which is a pretty well-known traditional publishing press. And any editor, copy editor, agent, etc., that worked on this book and is employed with Bloomsbury and Bloomsbury's marketing team should have picked up that maybe marketing the book to, young adults is not the best decision. Maybe it's inappropriate for that age group, specifically because there is some graphic, sexual experiences. However, I don't know the average age that, kids are having sex. I'm not going to look up any statistics. And I know I knew very few people in high school that weren't having sex. I certainly was. And I didn't, grow up in the best home. So, I can't speak for securely attached, well-adjusted children and their high school experience. However, I do find that, the greater issue of sex for, the young adult age range of 12 to 18 stems from, kind of the Puritan culture that the Protestants pushed when our country, was created. And I think that it is, if we look at our educational system, we do a great disservice to people in the age range of 12 to 18, regardless of, gender, sexual orientation, whatever it is. They're going through puberty, and most sex ed programs are not equipped, they're not equipping these kids to deal with themes of sex. And my own sexual education was putting a condom on a banana and being shown awful fucking pictures of what happens if you, the worst possible pictures of what can happen when you get an STD. And it's giving scared straight over education, right? And so I think that we do a disservice to the age range of 12 to 18, kids going through puberty, learning about themselves and their bodies, when we don't, give them the opportunity to learn about sex, explore sex in safe and controlled environments. A book, pretty safe and controlled environment. I would not suggest Haunting Adelaide. I would not ever suggest that sort of book, nor 50 Shades of Grey. Those are really the only two ones that I've read. I would not suggest those for, anybody in their young adult portion of life. I personally couldn't even get through Haunting Adeline because it was just a little too, abusive, but she wants it like as a narrative, which I don't think is, an awful thing in a book. There's a narrative going on. There's deeper themes in the book. I just didn't read enough to get through it. And that's my personal choice, but I'm not going to bash the book and say that it's bad just because I didn't read enough of it to get to a place where I could critically read and understand what this story is actually about. And that kind of leads me into, maybe some of my rebuttal to Maya's article. And, the first thing I would say is that, well, there's 2 points. So, on a personal level for all of us, we can really only understand what we're reading, what we're watching, the content we're engaging with, the stories that we're engaging with. We can only engage with those things and understand them depending on how kind of far past our own ego defense mechanisms we can get to sit with, what we're engaging with, right? And an ego defense mechanism isn't necessarily a bad thing. We all have them. I struggle with mine every day. And I think when you're reading and you're going to get on the internet and, critique something, it's important to look at, your own personal reasons for reacting the way that you're reacting to whatever it is that you're critiquing. And so, as I've said, Maya's biggest issue definitely just seems to be that it's all smut, and let's see, it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, which we know. It's predictable, it's poorly written. These are, direct things that she said. She does say that the only true original twist she includes in ACOTAR is her magic system, which is itself based in smut. And so, of course, she's talking about calamine in this, and talking about, the sexual rebirth ritual for the land. And that was such a small subplot to me that, like, I think that it is irresponsible to write that that's what the entire magic system is based around. It's just not true. However, again, she seems to be reading it with, have read the book and critiquing it based on the main issue that it's smutty, right? And so if we look at this, from a mature, literary, thematic, critical thinking, point of view, what I'm getting from this is that, in our culture, sex is both shamed and commodified, right? We see sex selling cologne, clothes. I don't know. I always see these beautiful men and women on, like, older adult, like diapers, like their diaper underwear that, you're going to put on your, 90-year-old grandmother who's lost control of her bladder, right? But, like, the woman on it is beautiful, and there's lace on the underwear. Like, that's even a commodification of sex. They're using sex and beauty to sell, this product, this medical product that's necessary, right? And so, there's the hypersexualization of the human body, and then there's also the shame, right? And there's a lot in between, right? And it's a spectrum. And, I know for myself that I don't always like reading, the sex scenes in a book. And I like to think that I have a mostly healthy relationship with sex. And sometimes it, like, really does bubble up feelings of, disgust or shame in me. And it's not anything to do with the writing or the characters or even sex itself, but, like, some of my own, shadow work of maybe feeling like, here are these people in deep pleasure, but do I deserve pleasure? Do I deserve some of the things that I'm, reading about? And I'm not saying that that's what Maya is, feeling, and that's why she can't get past the this is smut, point of view about ACOTAR, which is shared by a lot of people, I've found. But that's kind of the lens that I start to look at, the dislike of, erotic scenes in writing, and especially outside of, the erotica genre of fiction, because it's a whole, you go to Barnes and Nobles, you go to, my local large bookstore here in Portland, Oregon, Powell's, like, there is so many books that there is, Kindle Unlimited, like, there's so many books that are just, there's no plot, it's all sex. And I'm sorry, A Court of Thorns and Roses, the whole series it's not that. There's a very, very large overarching plot line and, many themes woven in, and sex is just one aspect of the rest of the story, right? And it's not even the biggest aspect. And so if we want to talk about actual themes, I'm only really going to talk about Feyre and our questionable hero, Tamlin. So starting with Feyre, our heroine, I mean, she had so much inappropriate responsibility put on her shoulders from a very young age. And you would think that Nesta should have done it, that as, eldest daughter kind of archetypes. But that, I think, personally alone is a twist in, Sarah J. Maas's writing, which, supports much of the later storyline, is that she was the youngest. She shouldn't have had to take care of the family, be the only one feeding them, and yet she was, because no one else would do it. And she didn't want to starve, and she, felt too much responsibility by her mother's dying wish to not do it. And so, we look at, from a psychological standpoint and a trauma-informed standpoint, we can look at what inappropriate responsibility does to a person. We all have our cultural, societal, familial programs going on in our mind. My husband likes to talk about how our brain is the hardware, and we are downloading and being indoctrinated and being taught the software, and so, Feyre's software is this overarching theme of inappropriate amount of responsibility to take care of people that she shouldn't have to be taking care of, doing it alone, feeling alone all the time in this, large, this large amount of responsibility. I don't have a better word for it. It's an insane amount of responsibility. And also the added trauma of not being able to trust, Nesta or Elaine, to not spend every single, amount of money that they get on frivolous things that isn't really needed. Feyre can't put herself first to get the new boots or the new coat that she needs, because of this, which is, traumatizing. It really is. Continuing that thread, Dad should be taking care of them, but he's, injured, he's depressed, he is dissociated, essentially, and it's just, I didn't have to go hunt for my family growing up, and I was very alone in similar ways, and that I always had to caretake other people and didn't get to be cared for or, even be taught how to care for myself. So I can sympathize and empathize with, Feyre's blight, I guess is a good word for it. And that responsibility continues as she's taken into the spring court. Like, sure, Tamlin's like, do whatever the fuck you want, paint, whatever. However, the underlying theme there is that she can feel that something's very wrong. Nobody's telling her what it is. There's a secret reality going on that everyone's tiptoeing around. And sure, it's the curse, and there's good reason why she can't be told. And it continues the theme of, inappropriate responsibility onto Feyre's shoulder, and eventually she ends up under the mountain because she realized, the curse came to its completion. Alice was finally able to tell her what was going on, and Feyre comes to, her programming hits. And sure, she loves Tamlin, but like the programming that she grew up with, it was so traumatizing, still hits in her mind of like, I have to be responsible to save these people, to save Tamlin, to save Lucian. Even, I'm not a Lucian stan, but I have to do this. I am Feyre. I take care of people. It is my responsibility to go try to save them. And I don't care enough about my life to, not be okay with trying and failing and being killed, and it's a heroic archetype, and it's also really fucking sad. Excuse my language. So Feyre's traumatized. She's traumatized growing up. She's obviously very traumatized from what happened under the mountain. And she's also, here's the first person, Tamlin, in her life that has valued her, that showed her any sort of real affection, that he took care of her family so that she could try to stop being so responsible all the time so she could rest. And I think that's a really, really strong thing to have somebody, meet the first person in your life who sees you, right? And that's not to say that Tamlin continues to see Feyre, but that's a video for a court of mist and fury, right? So, moving on to Tamlin, these are kind of the, themes that I've heard from other people and stuff that I have considered myself. The first being that Tamlin grew up in the Spring Court, and it was ruthless, and his whole family was killed by, the Night Court, and he killed the Night Court's royal family, and, he grew up in a Fae eats Fae world, right? And it's and furthermore, he never wanted to be the High Lord, who was, Rhysand pushed him into that. And he was doing it for a good reason, but it wasn't his choice. It fell into his lap. He was ill prepared. He never thought he would have to be the High Lord, and he resented it. And in his resentment, he couldn't move past it enough to be a good High Lord, right? So we can go on to talk about, one of the biggest themes, I think, in gender politics, at least on the internet, is, the theme of toxic masculinity. I personally really dislike the term toxic. I think that it had a specific meaning and has been kind of appropriated by the general public who maybe don't have a deeper understanding of how the mind works, psychology, defense mechanisms, maladaptive coping behavior, so on and so forth, right? And also something that I try to employ in my life, the concept of dialectics, which, just a very quick basic overview, is that it tries to move us away from polarized or black and white thinking. So rather than saying something like ACOTAR is about smut and it's bad, we can look at it, something like, yeah, ACOTAR has smut, and the writing, is it the best? No. And, and that stuff can be true, and it also has all of these other themes, like I'm talking about. So, in the end, the easiest way to explain dialectics is that two or more opposing truths can be true at the same time, even if they seem contradictory. And so when we're looking at the idea of toxic masculinity within Tamlin, and I'm no Tamlin apologist, however, and Tamlin's software, the things he was indoctrinated to, the things that he went through, has created him as, not a safe male, right? He comes off as safe in the beginning. We see later that he's not. And if we're looking at what toxic masculinity does to a man, we're looking at shame surrounding vulnerability, shame surrounding having any other emotions other than anger, needing to control other people, to feel masculine, that sort of whole trip, right? And it's, I think, an important theme in, the full series of, if we look at Tamlin's, shallow redemption arc. He sort of got there, he's not fully there, right? It is simply a narrative on, the toxic masculine character and what that sort of upbringing and, social cultural programming does to men, right? And so he's unable to get outside of that until, later on in the series. And even so, he's still so angry and resentful that does he really get outside of it? We don't know yet. I don't know if we'll ever know. Sarah J. Maas, can you please give us a book, another ACOTAR book instead of more Crescent City? Personal opinion. But, and so then we can, furthermore look at with the story of how the curse in the spring court came about, the Under the Mountain, what Amarantha was up to. That's 50 years of impending doom that Tamlin is never going to be able to lift this curse. He's had friends die, trying to find this one human woman that will love him without knowing, about his horrible past and the curse and all that sort of thing. Can you just imagine 50 years of isolation and and the responsibility of that, right? We go back to the theme of responsibility, and the, 50 years of hopelessness, of exhaustion, of, dread about what's going to happen when he can't lift the curse. He has to go back under the mountain, live under Amarantha's thumb for real, back to the horrors of what, goes on under the mountain forever. And and it's not just him, it's all of Prythian, the Fae side of Prythian. It's all of the courts are stuck there because of what Tamlin did. Because, he insulted Amarantha so fucking badly that she trapped everyone. So it's not even just the spring court that he's responsible for. It's everyone. And, I I can't even imagine being that responsible. I'm barely responsible enough for my cat, right? So, and a redeeming quality that, I do find in, Tamlin's personality and choices is that he did try to save Feyre. He sent her back on the carriage to go back to her, her dad's, new house and stay there so she doesn't have to endure what he has to endure. And I think that that's, an act of selflessness. He tells her he loves her, sends her off, doesn't ask her to say it back, barely waits for her to say it back. He does love her in, the limited way that a man who is struggling with, the themes of toxic masculinity that we discussed, in a way that, in a limited way that he can, right? And, a limited ability to love does, and this is where the dialectics come in, a limited ability to love does not change that it was, love from Tamlin. Is it the love that Feyre needed? Absolutely not. Were there portions of it that got really awful? Absolutely. Would I condone them ever being together or Tamlin ever having another partner until he can let go of his toxic masculinity and heal? No, he shouldn't. He needs to be in his single healing girl era, So, to kind of wrap this up, yes, in ACOTAR, there is sex, definitely sex. It is quite obviously, all of it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. First, the one beast takes her, later on, another beast takes her, falls in love with both. Girls got options. they're all beautiful. You know, all the Fae males are beautiful. You can't get mad at her. And absolutely, I think that, you know, Maya was spot on with, this book should not have been marketed as YA. Some of the themes are complicated, and you know, and the sex scenes are maybe not appropriate for children. I think that at some point, if we could, you know, educate our children, you know, more appropriately and in a healthier way on their own bodies and on sex, it's not necessarily an inappropriate thing for them to be reading, you know, books surrounding, you know, books with sexual experiences that are within the realm of consent. I don't think that, you know, it's a bad thing. I don't think that YA should always, you know, not have sex in it. It's just, I think, demands a cultural paradigm shift to be able to present it in a way that's, you know, healthy for children, teenagers specifically, and there are plenty of teenagers that benefit from, you know, this type of thing if they're engaging and exploring their sexuality within the bounds of consensual, healthy sex inside of a fantasy world. Is that really a bad thing? Is that worse than them, you know, going out to sneak out to an old, you know, as a sophomore in high school? Is this really worse than her sneaking out to, you know, go hang out with, to go hang out with, I'm trying to think of the word, a senior. Thank you. Thank you, Self. A senior from school who, like, doesn't really care about her. Like, I don't think so. But, you know, I also don't have children, so I can't really speak on that. I do think that my stepchild, you know, at, you know, 12, 13, 14 would be more than mature enough to read this. And you know, it's not a choice I make because I'm just a step parent, and I think that, you know, their parents would support it. That's just my thoughts, you know. Can't speak for them. But so, you know, the story in the end is not just smut, you know, and honestly, I would challenge this editor, Maya, and kind of anyone else who, you know, is kind of on the side of ACOTAR is just fairy porn. I would challenge them to read the rest of the series. For one, it doesn't really sound, I can't speak for Maya because she didn't say whether or not she got through the rest of the series, but I would challenge her to read the series and even reread the first one to come at it and engage with the storyline and the characters and the themes coming from a place of critical inquiry, you know, because that's really what reading is about, in my personal opinion. And I didn't think this when I was younger, and I do still like, you know, I still like Wattpad stories that are badly written, and, you know, I'm reading Remain Nameless right now by the Draco and Hermione fanfiction, you know, but even that has, you know, similar themes, right? And so, but when we engage with, you know, the content that we're consuming with a critical, you know, a critical mind, a critical eye, you know, we can kind of move past our ego defense mechanisms, you know, and again, what I would suggest Maya to do is to reread ACOTAR, read the rest of the series, you know, and even read all of Sarah J. Maas's, writing. Her Big Three series. I haven't read some of, like the Catwoman, Soul Stealer. I never read that. But ACOTAR, Throne of Glass, Crescent City, they all have a lot deeper themes than just, romance and sex. And if Maya is uncomfortable with how, the sex scenes, or she just feels like, maybe they don't add to the story that she wants to be reading, you don't have to read them. I skip sex scenes when I'm reading all the time, and it's not because, sex is bad. I have, a pretty good sex life with my partner. Like it's just that that's not always what I want to be consuming, right? I don't always want to be getting aroused reading a book, at fucking, 8 in the morning on a Friday or something, But, so skip the sex scenes if you want, but maybe apply, the college level skills of, critical inquiry and, writing down themes, literary analysis, essentially, that I'm sure she had to take these classes in college if she's, a content editor for what seems to be, an online newspaper. And, from there, her own understanding of these themes can widen, and it also, opens the conversation up for, something more than just putting down, writing just because, you aren't willing to do the work, to understand some of the greater themes. I will also, that was going to be my last thing that I said, but I just looked up at that article again and reread a paragraph, and so I just want to share it. It's that she brings up the romanticizing of Stockholm syndrome and unhealthy possessive relationships, which could be considered as abusive, that they're glorifying depictions of dangerous relationships. And, I don't think that, that's untrue in these, series about younger adults, and older fae warriors. I don't think that that's untrue. Right. And, if you can get past some of the first books that have these unhealthy relationships, you actually see that Feyre develops an extremely healthy relationship with one of these older fae males that essentially helps her, and how, they help each other heal from the horrible traumas that they faced. And, more themes are introduced, such as the theme of found family and the themes of how love can be a vehicle for your personal development, how love can be a vehicle for developing self-love, and, insofar as how a healthy, loving relationship where you're seeing, heard, validated, prioritized can be a vehicle, for not wanting to die because of your trauma. And so I think that's an important reason to get past the first book in a series like this. And I will say, I have a friend who had read the first book and hadn't picked up the others because of these same kind of arguments about the depictions of dangerous relationships with her own past history of, somebody who was not good for her. However, I did recommend that she has, if she wants to, she can read the others, and the narrative of Feyre's life, the direction of Feyre's life and her relationships takes a drastic turn of direction, and it changes the entire storyline. And so, yeah. So anyway, I would invite Maya to finish reading the series, look at it from a critical point of view, not critical in the sense of allowing, you know, all the things she doesn't like to take center stage, but critical in the sense of, can we think critically and, you know, use our college level educations to analyze the good and bad parts of a book. So anyway, that's that. This is my first video. I've been wanting to start a channel for a long time talking about books. I love reading. I am getting a bachelor's degree in creative writing. Like, I want to get into publishing. I just started querying my own book that deals with some of the same themes as ACOTAR. And, you know, I want it marketed, you know, for definitely a more mature audience. I would not market this as YA. You know, my own book is YA for the reasons that Maya said. So anyway, so I'm querying my own book. I read almost every day. I love to talk about books. I love fantasy. I really love anything I can get my hands on to read. Maybe not that much nonfiction. But yeah, if you want to check out kind of what's coming in the book that I'm querying and, you know, the series, or if you want to be a beta reader, that would be really helpful for me. You can go to my website. It's heatheremmanelson.com. There's a contact form at the bottom of the page. It's just a one-page website. And you can leave comments or, you know, talk about your interest in being a beta reader. So I really appreciate that. Thanks so much for watching.